Commander Jake Morrison stood at the large window of his ship's bridge and watched the biggest fleet he had ever seen come together in space. Ships from 17 different alien races floated in the darkness around his vessel. Some looked like giant metal birds with wings spread wide. Others were round like balls with spikes sticking out. A few looked like long snakes made of steel and glass. 200 warships hung in the black void of space. Each one was different. Each one belonged to a different species that had traveled across the galaxy to be here. Jake had never seen so many alien ships in one place. The sight made his heart beat faster. His own ship, the HFY Horizon, was small compared to some of the alien vessels. The human ships always looked simple next to the fancy alien designs. But Jake knew that simple often worked better than fancy when it came to fighting. Lisa Parker, his communications officer, walked up to him. Her short brown hair was tied back and her blue eyes looked worried. "Commander, we're getting messages from the other ships. They want to know when we start moving toward the target." Jake nodded. He looked at the star charts on the wall screen. Red dots marked where the enemy had been spotted, the Devourers. Even thinking the name made him feel cold inside. "Tell them we'll move out in 6 hours," Jake said. "Everyone needs time to get ready." Lisa went back to her station and began sending messages to the other ships. Jake watched her work. She was good at her job. All his crew were good at their jobs. They would need to be. Ryan Cole, his tactical officer, came over to join them. Ryan was tall and had strong arms from years of working with heavy weapons. His face was serious as he looked at the enemy positions on the screen. "Sir, I've been looking at the battle plans," Ryan said. "The aliens want us to go in first. They think human ships are better at taking hits." Jake frowned. He knew the real reason. The aliens thought human ships were cheap and easy to replace. They didn't say it out loud, but Jake could tell. Humans were the newest members of the galactic community. They had to prove themselves. "We'll do what we have to do," Jake said. "That's why we're here." A new voice came over the ship's speakers. It was deep and had a strange accent. Admiral Kethver, the fleet commander, was speaking to all the ships at once. Kethver was a Xanthari, one of the older alien races. He had 6 eyes and skin that looked like blue metal. "Attention all vessels," Kethver said. "We face the greatest threat our galaxy has ever known. The Devourers have awakened after sleeping for 1,000,000 years. They have already destroyed 3 star systems. We must stop them before they destroy more." Jake listened to the Admiral's words. He had heard this speech before, but it still made him nervous. The Devourers were not like other enemies. They were machines, but they were also smart. They learned from every fight. They got stronger every time someone tried to kill them. Dr. Amanda Bell came onto the bridge. She was the fleet's expert on alien technology. Her red hair was messy and her green eyes looked tired. She had been working for days without much sleep. "Commander," she said, "I need to tell you something important. I've been studying the Devourer machines we found on dead worlds. They're not just smart. There's something else." Jake turned to face her. "What do you mean?" Amanda held up a small device. It looked like a piece of twisted metal, but it glowed with a soft blue light. "This is part of a Devourer scout ship. Watch what happens when I point different weapons at it." She picked up a small laser pointer and aimed it at the metal piece. The piece began to change. Its surface became shiny and smooth. The laser beam bounced off it without doing any damage. "Now watch this," Amanda said. She put down the laser and picked up a small projectile gun. She fired a tiny metal bullet at the piece. The metal piece changed again. This time it became soft and flexible. "The bullet got stuck in it like mud. They adapt," Amanda said. "Whatever you use against them, they learn to defend against it. That's how they've survived for so long." Jake felt his stomach drop. This was worse than he thought. How do we fight something that learns from every attack? "I don't know," Amanda said, "but I'm working on it. There has to be a way." The ship's alarm began to sound. Lisa Parker's voice came over the speakers. "All crew to battle stations." "We're..." moving out in 30 minutes. Jake looked around the bridge. His crew was ready. They had trained for this moment for months. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Tony Martinez, the chief engineer, called from the engine room. Commander, we're getting some strange readings from our communication systems. It's like something is trying to scan us. Jake frowned. Can you block it? I'm trying, sir. But it's unlike anything I've seen before. It's not coming from the alien ships. It's coming from empty space. Amanda looked up from her device. That's impossible. There's nothing out there. Maybe there is, Jake said quietly. Maybe the Devourers are already watching us. The thought made everyone on the bridge go quiet. If the Devourers were already studying the fleet, they would know about human weapons and tactics before the battle even started. Lisa Parker turned around in her chair. Commander, I'm getting reports from other human ships. They're all seeing the same strange readings. Captain Hamilton on the Valiant says his sensors are picking up something, but they can't tell what it is. Jake made a decision. Get me a private channel to all human ship commanders. I need to talk to them without the aliens listening. Lisa worked at her station for a few minutes. Then she nodded. You're connected, sir. All human ships are on a secure channel. Jake picked up his microphone. This is Morrison. I think we have a problem. The Devourers might be watching us right now. They could be learning about our weapons and ships before we even get to the battle. Captain Hamilton's voice came through the speakers. I was thinking the same thing. My science officer, Carol Jensen, says these readings don't match anything in our databases. Other human commanders began to speak up. They were all seeing the same thing. Something was out there, watching and learning. We need to do something. Jake said, if the Devourers study us now, we won't have any surprises left for the real fight. Danny Wright, a communications expert on another ship, had an idea. What if we go dark? Shut down all our systems and run silent? The alien fleet would think we ran away, said Claire Davis, a navigation officer from the Valiant. Maybe that's what we want them to think, Jake said slowly. An idea was forming in his mind. What if we let them think we're gone, but we're really still here? Amanda looked interested. You mean use the stealth technology we've been working on? Jake nodded. The humans had been developing new kinds of invisibility systems. They weren't ready for combat yet, but maybe they didn't need to be perfect. It's risky, said Steve Hamilton. If we disappear now, the other species might never trust us again. But if we don't disappear, Jake said, the Devourers will know everything about us before the battle starts. We'll lose the war before it begins. The human commanders talked for several more minutes. Finally, they all agreed. It was a crazy plan, but it might be their only chance. All human ships, Jake said into his microphone. Prepare for Protocol 7. We're going dark in 10 minutes. From now on, we don't exist. Jake looked out at the alien fleet one more time. In 10 minutes, the humans would vanish. The aliens would think they had run away. But Jake knew the truth. Sometimes the best way to win a fight was to disappear completely. The countdown began. Jake watched the numbers on his screen get smaller. When they reached 0, everything would change. Captain Steve Hamilton watched the last light on his control panel turn red and go dark. The bridge of the Valiant was now lit only by small emergency lights that gave off a soft blue glow. Everything else had been shut down. No communications. No sensors, no weapon systems showing active signals. His ship had become a ghost in space. Final systems check, Steve said quietly to his crew. Even his voice was kept low, as if speaking too loudly might give them away. Claire Davis, his navigation officer, checked her instruments one more time. All navigation systems are offline. We're running on backup inertial guidance only. No electronic signals going out. Tony Martinez, the chief engineer, wiped sweat from his forehead. Reactor is running at minimum power. All electromagnetic signatures are hidden. We're as quiet as a floating rock. Steve nodded. Around him, 30 other human ships were doing the same thing. Every vessel in the human fleet had gone completely dark. They were still there, still moving forward with the main fleet, but now They were invisible to all scanning systems. It had been 2 hours since Protocol 7 began. Steve knew that right now, the alien commanders were probably very angry and very confused. On their sensors, it would look like every human ship had simply vanished into nothing. Danny Wright, the communications expert, sat at his station with all his equipment turned off. He was one of the few people who knew the real secret behind what they were doing. "Captain, should I check on the others?" "No," Steve said. "No communications at all. We stick to the plan. Radio silence until we reach the target." The plan was simple but dangerous. While the alien fleet continued toward the Devourer staging area, the human ships would follow along in complete stealth mode. The Devourers would study the alien ships and learn their weapons and tactics. But they would never know the humans were there. Carol Jensen, the sensor analyst, was working on something special at her station. She had been given orders to monitor the Devourer signals without sending out any detection beams of her own. It was like trying to listen to a conversation in the next room without opening the door. "I'm picking up something," Carol whispered. "The Devourers are definitely watching the main fleet. I can detect their scanning beams hitting the alien ships." Steve felt a chill. Their plan was working so far. The Devourers were focused on the visible ships. They had no idea that 30 human vessels were following right behind them. On the other human ships, crews were doing the same thing. Commander Jake Morrison sat in the dark on his bridge, waiting. Lisa Parker had turned off all her communication equipment and was now helping with the secret project. Ryan Cole was checking weapons that had been modified in ways the rest of the galaxy had never seen. Dr. Amanda Bell was working in her laboratory, but not on the Devourer samples anymore. She was working on something new, something that might give them a chance to win. Her hands moved carefully over strange devices that seemed to bend light around them. The hardest part was not knowing what was happening with the main fleet. The human ships could see the alien vessels on their passive sensors, but they couldn't send or receive any messages. For all they knew, the alien commanders were planning to court-martial every human in the fleet for desertion. Admiral Kethver's voice was probably echoing through the alien ships right now, demanding to know where the humans had gone. The Zenthari did not understand cowardice, and running away from a fight was the worst thing a warrior could do in their culture. The proud Kronan warriors were likely calling humans weak and untrustworthy. Their massive ships continued forward, but Steve knew they were angry. The Kronan had counted on human support in the coming battle. The delicate ethereals were probably confused more than angry. Their species thought in ways that other races couldn't understand. They might think the humans had evolved into pure energy or moved to another dimension, but Steve knew the truth. The humans were still there, still committed to the fight. They had just chosen to fight in a way that no one expected. Claire Davis was navigating by the stars and by watching the movements of the alien fleet. It was dangerous flying blind like this, but she was good at her job. She had trained for years to pilot a ship without electronic help. "Captain," she said softly, "we're about 6 hours from the target system. The alien fleet is maintaining formation, but I can see some ships changing positions. They're probably trying to fill the gaps where our ships used to be." Steve nodded. The alien commanders were smart. They would adapt their battle plans to account for the missing human ships. But they would be planning for a fight without human support, and that might actually work in everyone's favor. Tony Martinez was doing something that no engineer in the fleet had ever tried before. He was running the ship's reactor in a way that created almost no detectable energy signature. The fusion reactions were still happening, but they were contained in a special field that absorbed all the radiation. "This is incredible," Tony whispered to himself. "We're producing power, but nothing is leaking out. It's like we're not even here." That was exactly the point. The human ships had become invisible not just to sensors but to reality itself. They were using technology that was still experimental, still dangerous, but it was working. Danny Wright was listening to alien communications on a special receiver that didn't send out any signals. He could hear the confusion and anger in the voices of the alien commanders. Some were demanding that the fleet turn back to search for the humans. Others were calling for an immediate attack on the human homeworlds as punishment for abandoning the Alliance. They really think we ran away, Danny thought. They have no idea what we're actually doing. Carol Jensen was making an important discovery. The Devourer's scanning beams were more complex than anyone had realized. They weren't just looking at ship designs and weapons. They were studying the alien crews themselves, learning how different species thought and fought. "This is bad," Carol whispered to herself. The Devourers aren't just adapting to technology, they're adapting to the aliens themselves. She wanted to share this information with the fleet, but she couldn't. Radio silence meant no communications at all. The aliens would have to face the Devourers without knowing this crucial fact. On his ship, Jake Morrison was thinking about the same thing. He had suspected that the Devourers were more than just smart machines. They were learning about their enemies in ways that went beyond simple technology. Dr. Amanda Bell had made a breakthrough in her laboratory. She had discovered that the Devourer technology worked by existing in multiple dimensions at once. They could see and analyze anything that existed in normal space, but they might not be able to detect things that were shifted into other dimensions. The stealth technology isn't just making us invisible, Amanda realized. It's moving us slightly out of normal space-time. We're existing in a parallel dimension. This was why the human ships had truly vanished. They weren't just hidden from sensors, they were hidden from reality itself. The Devourers could scan the area where the human ships were located, but they would find nothing because the humans weren't completely in the same dimension anymore. Steve Hamilton felt his ship shudder slightly. The dimensional shift technology was still experimental, and it put stress on the hull and engines, but it was working. They were ghosts in space, following the alien fleet toward the greatest battle in galactic history. The alien ships continued forward, unaware that 30 human vessels were right behind them. The Devourers continued their scans, learning everything about the alien fleet. But they learned nothing about the humans. In a few hours, they would reach the target system. The battle would begin. And the aliens would discover that sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy never knows you have. The human ships flew on in silence, waiting for their moment to strike from the shadows. Admiral Keffer felt his 6 eyes narrow as the combined fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zarian system. What he saw made his blue metal skin turn pale with fear. The sight before them was worse than anything in the intelligence. Reports. 3 planets were gone, not destroyed but consumed. Where rocky worlds had once orbited the system's yellow star, now only strange metal debris floated in space. The debris pulsed with red and orange lights that hurt to look at. It was as if the planets had been eaten and turned into something else entirely. "By the ancient gods," whispered Commander Veltar, a Cronin warrior whose massive frame shook. With rage, they turned entire worlds into their feeding ground. The ethereal ship captain, Zephyrmind, spoke in thoughts that reached every mind in the fleet. The suffering of billions echoes through the quantum foam. This system screams with the pain of the consumed. But the worst sight was still ahead. Around the system's star, hundreds of pyramid-shaped ships waited in perfect formation. Each Devourer vessel was the size of a small city, their dark metal surfaces covered in spikes and weapon ports that glowed with deadly energy. They had been waiting for the Galactic fleet to arrive. Kethler counted the enemy ships on his tactical display. Over 300 Devourer vessels, each one more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever built. His own fleet had started with 200 ships, but now he had only 170 left. The humans had vanished, taking 30 ships with them. "All ships, prepare for battle," Kethler commanded. His voice carried across the fleet communications. "We fight not just for our worlds, but for every living thing in the galaxy. The Devourers must not be allowed to spread beyond this system." The first to attack were the Xanthari corvettes. These fast ships streaked forward like blue lightning, their plasma cannons charging with bright energy. Behind them came the massive Cronin dreadnoughts, their hull armor thick enough to stop small asteroids. The Ethereals prepared their reality-warping weapons, devices that could bend space and time itself. Commander Jake Morrison watched the battle begin from his hidden position. His ship, the GSV Horizon, was invisible to all sensors, following the battle from a safe distance. He could see everything, but he could do nothing to help his alien allies. Lisa Parker sat at her dark communication station, her hands shaking as she watched the alien ships charge toward certain death. "Sir, shouldn't we help them?" "They're going to be slaughtered." "We stick to the plan," Jake said, though his voice was tight with emotion. "If we reveal ourselves now, everything we've done will be for nothing." The Xanthari corvettes opened fire first. Bright blue plasma beams lanced out toward the Devourer ships. For a moment, it looked like the attack was working. The plasma struck the pyramid ships and burned through their outer hull plating. Then, the Devourers began to change. Jake watched in horror as the enemy ships shifted and adapted in real time. Their hull plating became reflective, bouncing the plasma beams back at the Xanthari ships. Within seconds, the Devourer vessels had become completely immune to plasma weapons. "Dear God," whispered Dr. Amanda Bell, who was watching from her laboratory. "They're adapting faster than we thought possible." The Cronin dreadnoughts fired. Next, their massive railguns sent metal projectiles flying at incredible speeds. The chunks of metal were moving so fast they should have punched through any armor, but the Devourer ships changed again. Their hulls became soft and flexible, absorbing the railgun impacts like sponges soaking up water. The Ethereals tried their reality-warping weapons, devices that could turn matter into energy or bend space itself. But the Devourers adapted to these attacks too. They sprouted new weapon systems that seemed to absorb the exotic energy and redirect it back at the ethereal ships. "This is impossible," said Ryan Cole, watching the tactical display. "They're adapting to every weapon at once. How can they change so fast?" Jake had a terrible thought. What if they're not adapting? What if they already knew about every weapon? In the Alliance arsenal, the battle turned into a massacre. The Xanthari corvettes were the first to fall. Their own plasma weapons, reflected back at them, cut through their hulls like knives through paper. The ships exploded in brilliant flashes of blue light. The Cronan dreadnoughts lasted longer, but not by much. The Devourers had developed new weapons that fired beams of pure destruction. These beams cut through the thick Cronan armor as if it were made of paper. The proud warriors died screaming battle cries that echoed across the communication channels. The Ethereals tried to retreat into other dimensions, but the Devourers followed them. The pyramid ships seemed to exist in multiple realities at once, able to attack targets no matter where they tried to hide. Captain Steve Hamilton watched from his invisible ship, the Valiant. His crew was silent as they witnessed the destruction of their allies. Claire Davis, his navigation officer, had tears running down her face. Tony Martinez was gripping his control panel so hard his knuckles had turned white. "Captain," whispered Carol Jensen, "I'm detecting something strange. The Devourer ships aren't just adapting to weapons. They're adapting to the alien crews themselves. They're learning how each species thinks and fights." This was the terrible truth that the humans had discovered during their silent observation. The Devourers weren't just studying technology. They were studying the minds of their enemies, learning to predict their every move. Admiral Kethver realized his fleet was doomed. More than half his ships were already destroyed, and the survivors were in full retreat. The Devourers pursued them like hunters chasing wounded prey, their adaptive weapons cutting down ship after ship. "All remaining vessels, retreat to hyperspace," Kethver commanded. "We cannot win this battle. We must warn the galaxy of what we have learned." But even as the surviving ships tried to escape, the Devourers were adapting to their retreat patterns. The pyramid ships began to move faster, their engines becoming more efficient as they learned from the fleeing Alliance vessels. Jake Morrison felt sick to his stomach. The greatest fleet in galactic history was being destroyed, and he was doing nothing to help. But he knew that revealing the human ships now would only add to the body count. The Devourers would adapt to human weapons just as quickly as they. had adapted to everything else. Then something impossible happened. The Devourers suddenly stopped their pursuit. The pyramid ships slowed down and began to turn away from the fleeing Alliance vessels. They were retreating toward the system star, but not in defeat. They were retreating in fear. "What's happening?" Lisa Parker asked. "Why are they running?" Jake looked at his tactical display. The Devourers were fleeing from empty space. There was nothing there, nothing visible on any sensor. But the ancient machines were backing away from something as if they had encountered their worst nightmare. "Sir," Ryan Cole said quietly, I think I know what's happening. The Devourers can't adapt to something they can't see or detect. They're running from something they don't understand." Jake felt his heart start to beat faster. The human ships were still invisible, still hidden, in their parallel dimension. The Devourers had no idea they were there. But somehow, the ancient machines could sense that something was wrong. "They know we're here," Jake realized. "They can't see us, but they know something is watching them." The surviving alien ships had escaped to hyperspace, carrying news of the terrible defeat back to their homeworlds. But the Devourers had stopped chasing them. Instead, they were scanning the area where the human ships were hidden, trying to find an enemy they couldn't perceive. Jake made a decision that would change everything. "All stations, prepare for battle. It's time to show ourselves." The moment of truth had arrived. The human ships would have to reveal themselves and face the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever known. The empty space near the Devourer fleet began to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The shimmer grew stronger, and suddenly the outline of a ship became visible. Then another. Then another. One by one, 30 human vessels materialized. Out of nothing, appearing like ghosts becoming solid again. Captain Steve Hamilton was the first to break radio silence. His voice came through the communication channels calm and steady, even though his heart was racing. "This is Captain Hamilton of the Earth defense ship Valiant. We're still here. We never left." On the bridge of the GSV Horizon, Commander Jake Morrison watched as his ship became visible again. The dimensional shift technology was powering down, bringing them back into normal space. Around him, his crew prepared for the fight of their lives. "Lisa, open a channel to the surviving alien ships," Jake ordered. "They need to know what we've learned." Lisa Parker's fingers flew over her communication controls. "Channel open, sir. The alien ships are asking where we've been. Admiral Kethver wants to speak with you immediately." Jake picked up his microphone. "Admiral, this is Commander Morrison. We've been here the entire time, studying the enemy. We know how to beat them." Admiral Kethver's voice came through the speakers, filled with anger and confusion. "You disappeared. Our sensors showed your ships were gone. We thought you had abandoned us." "We went invisible," Jake explained. "We had to study the Devourers without them knowing we were here. What we learned will save us all." Dr. Amanda Bell came onto the bridge, carrying a device that looked like a small computer. Her red hair was messy from working without sleep, but her green eyes were bright with excitement. "Commander, I've figured out their secret. The Devourers aren't just machines. They're something much more dangerous." Jake looked at the device in her hands. "What did you find?" "They exist in multiple dimensions at once," Amanda explained. "Their consciousness lives in the space between realities. That's how they can adapt so quickly. They can see and analyze anything that exists in normal space, but they can't perceive things that are shifted into other dimensions." Ryan Cole looked up from his tactical station. "That's why they stopped chasing the alien ships. They could sense something was wrong. But they couldn't see us." Amanda nodded. "Exactly. While we were invisible, I was able to study them up close. They're not individual ships. They're all connected to one central mind. That mind lives inside the system star." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "A hive mind?" "More than that," Amanda said. "Every Devourer ship is just an extension of one giant consciousness. If we can disrupt that connection, all the ships will become just empty metal shells." On the Valiant, Tony Martinez was working frantically in the engine room. He had spent the last few hours modifying the ship's weapon systems based on Amanda's Research. The new weapons fired particles that existed in a state of quantum uncertainty. They weren't really there until the moment they hit their target. "Captain," Tony called over the ship's intercom, "the quantum destabilizers are ready. These weapons don't technically exist until they strike the enemy. The Devourers won't be able to adapt to something that isn't there." Claire Davis, the navigation officer, was plotting a course that would take them directly into the heart of the Devourer fleet. "Sir, I've calculated the path to the system star. We'll have to go through all 300 enemy ships to reach the central consciousness." Steve Hamilton looked at his crew. These people had volunteered for what everyone knew was probably a suicide mission. "Are you all ready for this?" Ganny Wright, the communications expert, looked up from his station. "Captain, I've been monitoring the Devourer communications while we were invisible. They're not using radio or any technology we understand. They're communicating through quantum entanglement. Every ship is connected to every other ship instantly." Carol Jensen, the sensor analyst, added more disturbing news. "The Devourers are learning from the battle we just watched. They're already adapting to fight ships like ours, even though they haven't seen our technology yet." This was the most frightening thing about the Devourers. They didn't just adapt to attacks that hit them. They adapted to attacks they thought might hit them. They were preparing for battles that hadn't even happened yet. But the humans had one advantage the Devourers didn't know about. For the past several hours, while invisible, the human ships had been connecting their computer systems together. They had created their own kind of hive mind, a network that let all 30 ships think and act as one. Jake Morrison felt the connection activate in his mind. Suddenly, he could sense the thoughts and feelings of every human crew member in the fleet. He could see through the eyes of every captain, feel the determination of every engineer, share the courage of every soldier. "This is incredible," Jake whispered. "We're all connected." Lisa Parker gasped as the mental link reached her. "I can feel everyone. Captain Hamilton, Claire Davis, all of them. We're thinking together." The human fleet began to move as one organism. The 30 ships didn't need to communicate with radio or hand signals. They shared their thoughts directly, coordinating their actions with perfect precision. The Devourers detected the movement and began to respond. The pyramid ships started to turn toward the human fleet, their weapons charging with deadly energy. But something was wrong. The Devourers' sensors couldn't get a clear reading on the human ships. "They're confused," Amanda observed. "We're shifting in and out of their dimension. They can see us sometimes, but not always. It's like we're flickering in and out of existence." The human ships used this confusion to their advantage. They would appear just long enough to fire their quantum weapons, then disappear again before the Devourers could target them. The quantum bullets passed through the Devourer shields as if they weren't there, then became solid inside the enemy hulls. For the first time in the battle, Devourer ships began to take damage. The pyramid vessels tried to adapt, but they couldn't adapt to weapons that didn't exist until they struck. Explosions began to light up the enemy formation. Captain Hamilton led the charge toward the system's star. The Valiant had been equipped with the most advanced phase shift technology. His ship could stay invisible longer than the others, making it the perfect vessel for the final assault. "All ships, cover the Valiant," Jake commanded through the mental link. "Hamilton needs to reach the star." The human fleet split into two groups. 29 ships engaged the Devourer fleet, appearing and disappearing like ghosts in a haunted house. Their quantum weapons struck target after target, causing damage that the Devourers couldn't prevent or repair. The 30th ship, the Valiant, slipped through the chaos toward the system's star. Hamilton's mission was the most dangerous of all. He had to penetrate the star's corona and deploy a quantum virus that Dr. Bell had developed. The virus would disrupt the quantum entanglement that connected all the Devourer ships. "This is it," Hamilton said to his crew. "If we succeed, we save the galaxy. If we fail, we die trying." The Valiant accelerated toward the star, its hull beginning to glow from the intense heat and radiation. Behind them, the battle raged as human ships fought enemies that existed in multiple dimensions at once. The fate of every living thing in the galaxy now depended on 30 human ships that had learned to become invisible and think as one mind. The human fleet moved like a pack of wolves hunting in perfect coordination. 29 ships danced through space around the Devourer fleet, appearing and disappearing like deadly ghosts. Each time they became visible, their quantum weapons fired particles that the enemy couldn't see or stop. Commander Jake Morrison felt the thoughts of his entire crew flowing through his mind. Through the mental link he could sense Lisa Parker's determination, Ryan Cole's tactical precision, and Dr. Amanda Bell's scientific excitement. They were no longer just individual people. They had become one consciousness spread across 30 ships. "Target the command pyramid," Jake ordered through the mental link. His words appeared in the minds of every human crew member instantly. "If we can damage their coordination, they'll be easier to defeat." The human ships focused their fire on the largest Devourer vessel, a massive pyramid that seemed to be directing the others. Quantum bullets passed through its shields and exploded inside its hull. The pyramid ship began to list to one side, its weapons firing randomly, but the Devourers were learning, even from weapons they couldn't understand. Jake watched in horror as the pyramid ships began to move in new patterns, trying to predict where the human ships would appear next. They were adapting to the unpredictable. "They're getting smarter," Amanda warned through the mental link. "We need to finish this quickly." Far ahead, Captain Steve Hamilton guided the Valiant toward the system's star. The ship's hull was glowing white-hot from the intense radiation, and his crew was working frantically to keep the systems running. The temperature inside the ship was rising despite the best efforts of the cooling systems. "How much further?" Hamilton asked Claire Davis. Claire checked her instruments, her face pale from the heat. 2 minutes until we reach the corona. "The quantum virus deployment system is ready." Tony Martinez's voice came over the intercom from the engine room. "Captain, the hull is starting to buckle. We won't survive much longer in this heat." Hamilton looked at the star ahead of them. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Solar flares danced across its surface like fire demons, and the radiation was so intense it would kill them. All in minutes. But somewhere inside that star was the consciousness that controlled every Devourer ship. "Danny, are you picking up anything from inside the star?" Hamilton asked. Danny Wright was monitoring every possible frequency, looking for signs of the alien intelligence. "There's definitely something in there, Captain. It's not like any signal I've ever seen. It's like the star itself is thinking." The Valiant entered the star's corona, and immediately alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The outer hull was melting, and the ship's systems were failing one by one. But they were close enough now to deploy the quantum virus. Carol Jensen activated the deployment system. "Virus is ready for launch. Once we fire this, there's no going back." Hamilton looked at his crew. These brave men and women had followed him into the heart of the star to save the galaxy. "Fire the virus." The quantum virus shot out from the Valiant like a silver bullet. It was Dr. Bell's masterpiece, a digital weapon that could disrupt the quantum entanglement connecting all the Devourer ships. The virus entered the star and began to spread through the alien consciousness like a disease. Back in the main battle, Jake Morrison felt the moment when everything changed. Through the mental link, he could sense the confusion and fear of the Devourer consciousness as the virus began to take effect. The pyramid ships suddenly stopped their coordinated movements and began to drift randomly through space. "It's working!" Lisa Parker shouted. "The virus is disrupting their connection." One by one, the Devourer ships began to shut down. Their weapons stopped firing, their engines stopped running, and their hulls went dark. The greatest threat the galaxy had ever known was being defeated by a computer virus created by human ingenuity, but the victory came at a cost. The Valiant was being torn apart by the star's gravity and radiation. Hamilton's ship was breaking up, its hull cracking and its systems failing. Through the mental link, every human crew member could feel the Valiant's crew saying goodbye. "This is Hamilton." Steve's voice came through the link, weak but determined. "The virus is deployed. Take care of each other." The Valiant exploded inside the star's corona, taking Captain Hamilton, Claire Davis, Tony Martinez, Danny Wright, and Carol Jensen with it. Their sacrifice had saved the galaxy, but the cost was terrible. 5 brave people had given their lives. To stop the DVOURERS. Jake Morrison felt tears running down his face as he sensed the loss of his friends through the mental link. Around him, his crew was crying too. The mental connection meant that everyone felt the pain of losing the Valiant's crew. They died as heroes, Jake said quietly. We'll remember them forever, but there was no time to mourn. The Devourer ships were shutting down, but some were still fighting. The virus was spreading through their network, but it hadn't reached every ship yet. The remaining Pyramid vessels were trying to break free from the infected network. All ships, finish them off, Jake ordered. Don't let any of them escape. The human fleet moved through the disabled Devourer ships like farmers harvesting wheat. Their quantum weapons destroyed the Pyramid vessels one by one, making sure that none of the ancient machines could survive to threaten the galaxy again. Dr. Amanda Bell was monitoring the quantum virus through her instruments. The virus has reached 90% of their network. The remaining ships are trying to disconnect themselves, but it's too late. The infection is spreading faster than they can cut the connections. The last Devourer ship went dark 20 minutes after the virus was deployed. 300 Pyramid vessels now floated dead in space, their hulls cold and their weapons silent. The greatest military force in galactic history had been defeated by 30 human ships and a computer virus. Jake Morrison opened a communication channel to the surviving alien ships. Admiral Kethfer and the other commanders had been watching the battle from a safe distance, trying to understand what they were seeing. Admiral, this is Commander Morrison. The threat is over. The Devourers are defeated. Kethfer's voice came through the speakers, filled with amazement. How? We saw our weapons fail against them. How did you succeed where we could not? We didn't fight them the way they expected, Jake explained. We became invisible, we learned their secrets, and we attacked them in ways they couldn't predict or adapt to. Sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy never sees coming. The alien commanders wanted to know more about human technology. They asked about the invisibility systems, the quantum weapons, and the mental link that had allowed the human ships to fight as one. But Jake kept the explanation simple. We went silent because silence itself was our weapon, he said. The Devourers could adapt to any attack they could see and analyze, but they couldn't adapt to an enemy that didn't exist in their reality. Admiral Kethfer was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke again, his voice filled with respect. We owe you an apology, Commander Morrison. We thought you had abandoned us. Instead, you made the greatest sacrifice of all. You disappeared completely to save us all. Jake looked around his bridge at his crew. They had won the battle, but the cost had been high. Captain Hamilton and his crew were gone, and the galaxy would never know their names or their sacrifice. We did what we had to do, Jake said. That's what humans do. We find a way to win, even when winning seems impossible. The human fleet began the long journey home, carrying with them the knowledge that sometimes the greatest victories come not from making the loudest noise, but from becoming the perfect silence in the storm.